The meadow at the foothills of the Silverpine Ridge was a place where the earth always seemed alive. The soil was soft, dark, and full of movement: worms, beetles, roots, burrowing rodents. Farmers called the area the underfield, because so much of its life happened beneath the surface. In this living soil tunneled a European mole known to the local wildlife trackers as hollow paw. He had earned the name from the slight deformity in one of his forepaws, which curved inward but had not stopped him from mastering the underground maze he built over the years. Hollowpaw moved through the darkness with practiced ease, sensing vibrations with his sensitive snout and whiskers. But recently, the earth had changed. The soil didn't settle the way it used to. Whenever Hollowpaw tunneled forward, loose dirt did not collapse smoothly behind him. Instead, it shifted unpredictably. Sometimes it hung suspended for seconds before slumping, other times it compacted too tightly. To an underground creature, such inconsistency meant danger. A tunnel could collapse, suffocating its builder. Or remain open when it should close, letting predators follow the scent. The cause of the change was not immediately clear, though Hollowpaw felt it in his bones. Vibrations used to be soft and rhythmic: rain drumming, deer walking above, or a fox's padded feet. But now new tremors came, metallic and harsh. Above ground, a young soil ecologist named Mara Leland knelt near a sensor probe she had installed 2 weeks earlier. For months she'd been studying moisture changes in the meadow, which she suspected were being affected by a recent agricultural expansion. Nearby fields had been converted to fast-yield crops, requiring heavy machinery and frequent irrigation. Mara checked the readings and frowned. Soil compaction levels rising. Again, she murmured. But this area should still be loose. Something's interfering underground. A distant rumble from a tractor reached her ears. She sighed. Hollowpaw also heard it, felt it, rather, through the ground. A long, angry vibration that flattened worms and crushed smaller tunnels. He scurried deeper into the earth. A young badger named Bramble, heavy-shouldered and inexperienced, dug nearby. He had recently taken over an abandoned set but didn't understand why worms were scarcer than usual. He clawed aggressively through the dirt, unaware of how close he was to collapsing Hollowpaw's tunnels. Meanwhile, a barn owl watched from a fence post, pale feathers glowing in the low afternoon light. She was called Solace by the bird watchers who followed her seasonal nesting trends. She too noticed the change: fewer voles to hunt, fewer insects, fewer small movements in the grass. She listened to the faint shifting beneath the surface, trying to make sense of it. 3 animals, 3 instincts, 1 landscape, all beginning to unravel. Beneath them, Hollowpaw pushed forward, hoping to reach one of his older tunnels where the soil still felt familiar. But the passage ahead had collapsed days earlier. The air smelled different, earth mixed with a faint chemical sharpness. He paused, pressing his nose to the dirt. Something new was seeping into the ground. The underfield trembled again. And the soil didn't settle. Night fell, but underground it made no difference. Hollowpaw relied on touch, smell, temperature shifts. He sensed a worm nearby and snapped it up, its faint movement a blessing in the increasingly unstable soil. Above, Mara drove her truck toward a spot where local farmers had reported unusual sinkholes. She stepped out with a flashlight, scanning the dark meadow. The holes were real, small, irregular, scattered. They didn't look like natural erosion or animal burrows. She knelt beside one, touching the powdery dirt. This shouldn't be happening unless something is disrupting the soil layers. A loud rustle made her turn. Solace the barn owl glided overhead, wings whisper quiet. She circled once, then twice, before diving into the grass and emerging with nothing. No prey. Another empty hunt. Mara made a note: barn owl failed hunting attempt number 12 this week. Meanwhile, Bramble the badger clawed at the earth near a thicket, ripping through roots in search of beetles. His powerful paws created tremors that shook Hollowpaw's tunnels. Hollowpaw stopped, listened. The vibration pattern was familiar: badger. He backed up instinctively. Badgers were one of the few predators capable of digging fast enough to catch a mole. But something was strange: the tremors were stronger than usual. Bramble wasn't just digging, he was thrashing, confused by the compacted soil. Suddenly, the tunnel wall beside Hollowpaw caved in. He barely escaped as Bramble's claws pierced the soil inches away. Hollowpaw fled into one of his older tunnels, but even there, the air felt stale. He reached a chamber he had dug many seasons ago. It smelled wrong, like fertilizer, but stronger and more synthetic. The walls were damp. The ceiling sagged. Above him, Mara discovered an irrigation hose leaking a milky fluid into a shallow trench. Not water, pesticide runoff. Someone had connected it improperly. She shut off the valve, her chest tightening. This is going straight into the ground. Straight into Holopaw's world. That night, the soil around his tunnels softened into sludge. Not the natural wetness after rain, a sticky, suffocating moisture that clung to his fur. He coughed, tiny lungs burning. The underfield was poisoning itself, and none of its inhabitants understood the full chain of consequences. But they would. Soon. Morning brought wind and scattered clouds, but little relief. Mara returned with equipment to test soil samples. As she scooped the first handful, she noticed how clumped it felt. Too dense, she muttered. This level of compaction shouldn't happen in a natural meadow. At that moment, a distant crack echoed across the field. Then another. A large section of the meadow ground suddenly dipped several inches, too subtly for a human at a distance, but dramatically for any creature beneath. Holopaw, deep in his tunnel network, felt the shift like a thunderclap. The earth above him trembled. The soil began to sink. He raced back the way he came, but the corridor was collapsing behind him. Dirt rained down, blocking paths he had used for years. His lungs burned, not from exertion but from the faint chemical fumes that still lingered. He burst into a secondary tunnel, then another, but each path was compromised. Above ground, Bramble also sensed the shift. He abandoned his set and lumbered uphill, unsure why the earth trembled but trusting his instincts. Sala circled overhead, startled by the sudden rippling of the grass. Mara ran toward the depression forming in the meadow. She shouted to a nearby farmer, "Stay back. That whole section might be unstable." The ground sagged again, this time dramatically, creating a shallow bowl-shaped sink. Below, Holopaw found himself trapped in a dead end. The soil behind him slumped inward, blocking the route. He dug desperately, pushing forward, but the ground was too sticky and heavy. His malformed paw slowed him down. The soil pressed in from all sides. He squeaked, a tiny sound swallowed by the earth. Then a faint tremor came through the soil, a rhythmic tapping. Not earth movement. Not machinery. A digging animal. And getting closer. It was Bramble. Though badgers rarely helped moles, Bramble sensed the collapse had trapped something alive. He clawed downward through compacted soil, widening his tunnel until a rush of stale air burst upward. Holopaw felt fresh air brush his whiskers. He pushed toward it, exhausted. Bramble's large form appeared through the collapsing dirt. They locked eyes briefly, prey and predator, but neither acting as such. Holopaw squeezed past him, scrambling upward. The ground shuddered again. Bramble shoved himself backward, nearly trapped as the lower chamber collapsed entirely. Above them, Mara watched the sinkhole widen slightly, but stabilize, barely. She had no idea two animals had just escaped death beneath her feet. The next day, Mara contacted the county environmental board and explained the soil instability, the improper irrigation line, the pesticide contamination, and the potential danger to both wildlife and farmland. But bureaucracy moved too slowly. While she waited for a response, she continued studying the meadow. She set up non-invasive ground sensors and motion cameras. She noticed the decline in insects, the absence of voles, the strained behavior of the barn owl. And then she found a series of mole tunnels exposed at the edge of the collapse. She recognized them by their smooth walls and compacted plugs. Some were fresh, others had caved in. She touched the earth gently. There are animals struggling down there. Meanwhile, Sala struggled through another night of poor hunting. She swooped low and caught a single beetle. One beetle for an entire night of flight. She perched on a low branch, chest heaving. The meadow no longer fed her. Holopaw resurfaced in a different part of the field where the soil was still somewhat breathable. But he was weaker now. Less food, worse air, inconsistent soil. His paws moved slower. He encountered a drowned worm, a sign of chemical oversaturation. He sniffed it and recoiled. Bramble also suffered. His claws hurt from digging through unusually dense soil. His foraging yielded almost nothing. The entire ecosystem had begun to starve. Mara presented her findings to two local farmers, trying to convince them to reduce chemical runoff. They were sympathetic but said crop demands were high and margins tight. One said, "If we don't boost yields, we can't compete." Mara countered, if the soil collapses, you won't be able to farm this land at all. It was a battle of horizons, long-term consequences versus short-term survival. As evening set in, Mara walked across the meadow, her boots crunching lightly on the brittle topsoil. She spotted Solace perched on a dying ash tree. The owl stared at her with wide, hollow eyes. You were hungry too, Mara whispered. She knelt down and scanned the ground. Multiple mound openings had appeared, moles and voles searching for safer ground. Then, without warning, another tremor ran beneath her. Mara felt it through her soles. So the collapse wasn't a one-time event. The underfield had become a fragile skin stretched over a hollow world. And Hollowpaw was digging directly into the most unstable section. The final collapse began just after dawn. A deep, resonant crack shuddered through the meadow. Birds erupted from trees. Solace screeched and launched into the air. Bramble sprinted from his set. Mara, already in the field, spun toward the sound. No, not again. The ground ahead bulged, then sagged, then tore open. A wide sinkhole formed, swallowing grass, roots, insects, decades of layered soil. Hollowpaw felt the collapse from below before it began. The air pressure changed, the earth stiffened and then loosened all at once. He sensed the death of tunnels he had painstakingly carved. The earth groaned like a living creature. He ran, but the ground ahead fragmented. His whiskers vibrated violently, his world was breaking. Above him, Mara saw small movements in the sinking grass. She sprinted toward the edge, yelling, "Something's alive down there." The sinkhole widened. Soil poured downward. In the chaos, Solace dove toward the opening, wings beating hard. She screeched loudly, perhaps trying to warn, perhaps reacting to instinct. Bramble, near the edge, dug frantically downward, trying to reach hollow space he sensed below, but the soil was shifting too fast. Hollowpaw was caught in a funnel of falling dirt. His tiny body tumbled, battered by clumps of earth. He clawed desperately, lungs burning. A shadow fell across him. Not a predator shadow. A human one. Mara's hand plunged into the collapsing soil, scooping upward, grasping blindly. Her fingers brushed something small and trembling. Hollowpaw. She pulled him free just as the last section of the sinkhole crumbled into a pit several meters deep. She backed away, cradling the exhausted mole in her hands. Bramble stared up at her from a safer distance, sides heaving. Solace circled overhead in tense, erratic loops. Mara whispered, "It's okay. I've got you." Hollowpaw twitched weakly, but he breathed. In the following days, the meadow was fenced off. Soil restoration experts arrived. The leaking irrigation system was dismantled. Pesticide use was temporarily banned. Engineers reinforced the most unstable sections. Mara released Hollowpaw near a part of the field where the soil was still loose and healthy. The mole hesitated, sniffed the air, then burrowed downward, slowly, cautiously. Bramble returned to a safer area of the ridge. Solace began finding voles again as insect numbers rebounded. It would take years for the underfield to heal. But the soil, once on the verge of collapse, had finally spoken loudly enough for humans to listen. And beneath the meadow, Hollowpaw dug once more, through soft earth that settled gently behind him.